Sure, you're on.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Reimagining Work podcast with Roger Nort and John Wenger. And as we said at the end of last episode, this episode is entitled Planet Social Business. And that name will become a bit clearer as we go through today's conversation. Today, Roger is the man with the knowledge, and I have some understanding, Roger, of social business. It's a term that I've kind of heard used around me, and I've used it myself. I think for a bit for me, but mostly for people who listen, it would be useful to have this conversation so that we get clear what social business actually means, because I know there's a number of different uses of the term. So let's launch straight into the conversation. And first of all, when you, in your position as an expert in this area, talk about social business, what do you mean?
Well, there's a very long version that I always try to avoid, and that's the version
Yeah,
when I
we've only
start
got half an hour, so avoid the long version.
yeah, when I start talking about it, you just keep going, and you always think of something else that you can add to the situation. I'll just start with my definition of what I think it is, just to narrow it down. I think social business is a more open social construct. So it's something very fundamental, which you create in order to facilitate the sharing of knowledge, experiences, innovation, and open communication between employees. And you support all this with the available technology that we have nowadays. So it's one end, it's going with the times and using the available technology that's out there nowadays, but the basis is in a more social, more open construct. I like to call it a construct because it's a framework that you set up in order to facilitate all your employees, but it's also external, so partners, but also clients can be part of it, and it's all about basically sharing the information that you own, that you have, knowledge, experience. Like I said, knowledge, experience, innovation. That's the short version. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, a question came as you were speaking, and this is not a dumb question. It may sound like it, but you know, it's sharing knowledge, experience, innovation, communication. There's in there an assumption that sharing is a good thing, and I'm thinking about, you know, lots of things that I read and hear about people being overloaded at work and too many emails and too much knowledge and too much information. Like, why would people want to share more?
It's not sharing more. It's just sharing what you have, right? It's the goal is not sharing in and of itself. So it's not like I have some information, whatever it is, and I need to share that. It's more in a situation where you create something and it is shared anyway. And although obviously you have control over what it is that you do share, I mean, it's not like anything you create, but it's more make it shareable. Right? It's as far as that's concerned, it's more similar to the use of social media, being successful on social media. You do that by creating content that people want to share. And if you hold the same philosophy for within a company, that means that most of the content that you will create is something that is valuable to the company, and that, of course, is the bottom line, is to create extra value for the company. So it's not necessarily that you need to share more or create more information. It's about creating or tagging or documenting whatever it is that you're creating in a proper way so that people can find it. So it is shareable.
Right? So that, I mean, so it sounds like, I mean, that it's sort of a completely different culture, a way of seeing things or doing things or seeing the world, a different sort of mindset. And I think when we spoke earlier, that's where I kind of came up with that picture in my head, at least, of Planet Social Business. It sounds a little bit like a different planet to the one that most businesses and most people are familiar with. Like not just a couple of new habits or new practices, but an entirely different culture, ways of being. So I have this picture of planet social business, and then in my kind of playful way in my head, I went planet antisocial business. Like there are two planets. Are we currently inhabiting planet antisocial business, or what would you say that we're currently living through? And what does it look like on planet social business? If I was to go and visit planet social business, what would it look like, sound like, smell like? What would be the differences between the two cultures?
Right. Well, first, I don't think that if you're not on planet social business that you're per definition antisocial. It's although it can be, right? I mean, there are companies that are completely antisocial with their employees and treat them in a completely unacceptable way, and but they're so far out there that it's almost impossible to get them into the fold, if you will. So it's more like a non-engaged business. So it's more that they're not engaged with the employees in a way, and I'm talking about management and employees and everybody in between, and just employees between each other. Also, there's not much engagement between them or with the company, and that can create all sorts of problems where people are just not interested in what happened, so they're not, they don't put in the effort that you would want them to put, or they just don't care. And but I think if you would, physically move yourself from planet whatever we're living in now, industrial age, to hey, you take your time machine or your spaceship and you move to planet social business, you'd be surprised how it would be. In an ideal world, it sounds sometimes very utopian, very tranquil, very comfortable, very comfortable, very, very trustworthy, very warm. It's like you walk into a room and there's only people there that you know, that you love, that you trust. And I'm not saying you have to go out and love your employees or your coworker, but the environment that should be created within the social business in order to have people share and give and do what you want them to do, you have to create a certain environment which is which creates establish this open and transparent and trustworthy, thoughtful environment. So I think you would definitely, if you come from a anti-social business and you walk into a socialized business, you would definitely feel the difference between the one and the other. And it's not just, I think, something that you would experience while working. Actually creating a document or a report or something or whatever, but you will notice it in different ways too, because if done right, it's also about the attitude of the people that will change along with changing the philosophy of the business. So finding information or trying to solve a problem will be, instead of frowned upon, where you go like, people, I've got this problem, I don't know, or I made a mistake, right? How many people run into a point where they go like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, and they get burned for it. Beautiful example. Today, an ex-colleague of my wife, she got a reprimand. A verbal reprimand. She failed in her duties while making a contract. She works at an life insurance company. And she works overtime in the evenings, on Saturdays, because it's so busy, because they don't want to hire enough people to do the work, the labor. She's done in the last month 135 contracts, something like that, a lot. When something goes wrong, and it eventually does, inevitably does, when you put too much pressure on people, something breaks. She gets reprimanded for that. When you would have a social business, it can be busy, sure. You can be asked to work overtime or a little bit more or whatever. But when you actually make a mistake and they come to you, they don't need to burn you for it. They don't need to reprimand you for it. What they can do is just go like, you made a mistake. What can we do about it? What can we do as management to help you not to make that mistake again? Instead of just reprimanding and telling me, like, you're not allowed to do that again.
Well, even I'm thinking if you take a few steps back before the mistake occurred.
That's the thing, right?
In a world of in the world of social business, what things may have occurred differently that may not have led to the so-called mistake or error happening?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point. Good point. For instance, I'm wibbling. The situation where she would find herself in, where a mistake is inevitable, would be good to prevent, right? I mean, that would be the logical thing. One way would be a good interaction, a good engagement from management to the employees who actually do the work. They have again and again told management that it's just a lot of work. And if you have employees working overtime on a total regular basis, and I'm talking like every day, even on Saturday, you're doing something wrong. And this has to be noticed. And management has to know that and has to be able to do something about that. I mean, they know that these people work way more time than they should work. Everybody knows that if you work 60 hours a week and you go and you work on a Saturday or whatever, at some point things go wrong. And in a social business, problems like these would be identified much sooner, but also dealt with in a constructive manner. And not necessarily where employees go like, there's too much work, do something about it. No, they would come with suggestions. They would come with ideas. It would be invited. They would, management would ask, people, we have this situation, what is it that we can do to make this happen? And then people can come up with ideas. No matter how crazy they might sound, at least they can put them out there. And in many cases, even the thought of having an idea or a suggestion is frowned upon and not taken seriously. Maybe if it's an extremely good idea, people might. If it's a bad idea, you get burned for it, you get reprimanded for it. And in this particular case, I mean, if people would have come with suggestions on how things could be improved, which I know they have, but management doesn't want to listen, doesn't want to do anything about it. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, we're kind of moving into the conversation of the benefits. Why be a social business? And so how, if say management aren't actually interested in hearing suggestions, a lot of the way that you're describing this is still based on the relationship between, say, workers and management, which doesn't sound like too much of a revolution. What is the thing that's going to make things social? Is it social between workers and management, or is it between workers doing, because you've mentioned doing problem solving amongst themselves? Like, where does the social come into it, and how does it sort of mediate for problems before they arise, or help people to solve things themselves, or is it really about giving management more technological channels to communicate to staff and vice versa?
Nah, yeah, exactly. No, it's changing the as far as communication goes. You change to a different communication channel. Okay, you might still have email, but you don't really need it. It's going to lose its functionality because you have a different way of communicating, and if you will, it's you've got Jammer, Jive, IBM Connect. You have all these different software platforms, but the main point is that you can find people quickly and ask questions to a community and have that answered quickly and be much more productive. And but yeah, problem solving. If somebody has a problem and he can put it up on the board or wherever you want to call it, or however in the digital village or whatever you want to call it, and he puts it out there and says, look, people, I have this problem, whatever it is, and somebody else can pick up on that and go like, yeah, I've noticed that too. Have you done anything about it? He said, no, I haven't done anything about it. I can't come up with anything. Have you? Well, I've been thinking about it, and then there might be a third person or a fourth person who has had the same problem, and they can get back, together to try and work it out. And mainly, one of the things, it's about the speed at which this can happen, supported by new technology. It's the awareness of people that they can solve problems in a different way other than sending an email to somebody who they might think can help. Usually you send an email to HR or your manager, and either that person helps or he doesn't, she doesn't, and then it ends right there. That's as far as you can go. In this particular case, the information can be put up on the board, let me call it that, and anybody can see it. And with the right tags, the CEO can, go onto the channel and whatever to the chat, the network, the social network within the company, and search for a certain hashtag or whatever you want to call it, and find that issue that those people are talking about, and he can read up on it. He can see the whole history of the communication or the conversation that they're having. And he can see whether or not there are any good ideas in that. And there might be a problem he didn't even know about, that it even existed. And it might even happen that employees just solve the problem. Or that they need a little bit of a budget for it. Or they need somebody's cooperation in the C-suite in order to solve the problem. But they can work it out amongst themselves. Either they can actually solve the problem, or they can bring it up to the C-suite or wherever it needs to go and say, look, people, this is the problem that we're having. We've discussed it with several people across several departments, including HR, and we did ask legal about it. And this is what we think can solve the problem. And then the CEO, the CIO, whatever, he can, the CFO, how many are there? They can go over the plan and go like, oh yeah, okay, there's a solution. Well, you need a budget. Oh, this there too. Oh, these are the benefits. Okay, well, go and do it. And then the time spent in C-suite with that problem can be 10 minutes, right? In some cases, and then the problem is solved. And of course, like I said, it's utopian. It might sound utopian. I'm not entirely convinced that utopia is something that's unreachable. So it would be something to work towards, and but it's a scenario, and there are many scenarios. This is like a problem-solving scenario where people.
Well, I think it's good to focus on something concrete. Like the problem-solving scenario is a great one. So I'm just thinking the way you described that. There is very much
the one that can hurt the most, right?
Well, yes, and I think it's still underneath it. There's a shift in attitude and mindset. I think we've maybe mentioned before that a lot of what goes on in industrial age structures is that managers are about holding control and power, So the revolution, and my interest and passion in the work I do is around where does power sit? Where does decision-making power sit? Where does problem-solving power sit within an organization? And so if the C's decide that they're comfortable with people being social, problem solving together, decision making together, because actually they're the ones that hold most of the knowledge, say, around customers and what customers need. There is an attitude shift that's occurred, I think, with management, that they reimagine what their role is in an organization, where it's not about them as being the holders of all the knowledge and best practice, and that people need to refer to them for decisions and problem solving. But people go, actually, we know how to do this. That's why they've hired us. We need to involve the C's when it's relevant to their role in supporting us with.
When it exceeds a certain budget, or a certain time frame, or it has a certain impact on business objectives that have been set. You know, when you get to a certain level, certain people should be involved, and in some businesses, certain levels get involved on things they shouldn't be worried about.
That's right. Yeah.
I have another example. This is from Tim Ferriss' book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and his approach was to work less, be more productive, and spend less time. Well, whatever your reasons are or your approaches. In this case, it was about having a help desk where people can call in with problems regarding products. At some point, the limit of how much the customer care person, employee, could give back or service on was like $100, right? And anything above that amount, they'd have to call the manager, talk to the manager, and they have to give an okay. So people were really busy. And the manager, in this case, I think it was Tim Ferriss, or it was an example that he had, but it doesn't really matter. It was like spending a huge amount of time and on deciding whether or not you should rebate people or whatever. Is it rebate?
Refund.
Okay. Yeah. And so he upped it to $400, and the amount of time that customer care employees were calling him decreased dramatically, because most of the problems could be solved within that bracket, and anything above that would be a bigger problem and would need a little bit more attention, but everything below could be solved by the customer care employee. Customer happy, customer care employee happy, because he can actually solve the problems. He doesn't have to call anybody, can make a decision, has power. Manager can be busy with other things, things that are more important, things that for him at least would be more important.
Okay, and so that I think that's a really good one to identify first. So increased customer satisfaction, and that customers are actually getting their needs met. If business is more, to use the term that we're using, more of a social business, that there's more openness, transparency, the kind of decision-making, problem-solving authority is a bit more dispersed. It's not just managers. So one benefit is increased customer satisfaction, probably decreased return calls from customers because they haven't had their problem fixed the first time. So that would be a benefit. What would be some of the, like, why be a social business? Because there may be people who are considering it and think, well, one, I'm not interested in the technology, or I don't understand the technology, or why would we do this? Why would we need to install a new technology or teach people to use it? They're social enough. They speak with each other in the lunch breaks, and you know what I mean? Like, they see each other in the water cooler, in the corridors, or they know where everyone sits. Why would we need? Why invest in your time, your effort, your money in being a social business?
So you have all the collective knowledge of the company, which is and has unmeasurable value. And some of it is actually shared at the water cooler, but mostly people just talk about other people. Stuff they created or content they created. Every document that's created by an employee has value for the business. If I email you that document and I keep the other document on my personal drive, who's going to read it? Who's going to find it? Nobody. So if I solve a problem because you had one, and I send you an email solving the problem, you can work, you can do your work, fine. Who else can find it? Absolutely nobody. If you do it within whatever, if you call it a social network, if you use the software and you tag it, and people run into the same problem, they can do a search and they can find the document that you've written and go like, oh, exactly. Now I know. And he can, or she can obviously, find that answer in 10 seconds.
So it's being plugged into institutional knowledge and wisdom and experience. A bit like being in the Borg. You hear everyone's voices.
Yeah.
Everyone's
knowledge. You have to filter them out, yeah.
Yeah, you have to filter them out. So there is access to that kind of wider institutional knowledge if your business is more social. Yeah, okay.
There are many, many, many more benefits, right? I mean, the community that drives the solutions, instead of a manager has to come up with a specific solution to a problem, you can have the community come up with a solution for the problem. You can have better communication with partners because they have access to your knowledge base. So partners can find answers to problems like that. Instead of that they have to contact somebody, that person has to go through an archive in order to find a certain solution for a problem. Partner can do it themselves. Quicker to market. You can get to market quicker because you have much more conversation space in order to solve whatever problems you might have creating a product. There's more trust. You have to have more trust. You have to have a more open environment where people can trust each other in order to put yourself out there and try and create something. And trust breeds trust, right?
There you go, being utopian again.
Yes.
Which comes first? And this is again not a dumb question. I'm curious from your experience, the trust or the social mindset,
trust.
Or is it? Do you think? Right. Okay.
I think, and this goes from, and that's why it's so important that you have to have top level management inclusion, a commitment. Because they have to let go, right? They have to trust that their employees will make the right decisions, will take the responsibility that they need to take. And you know, if your manager doesn't trust you, you'll know, and you won't trust him either.
So there is a thing that needs to happen for amongst the managers in terms of the culture of trust. In the foreword to your book, there's a quote that says you cannot opt out of being a social business, which I presume you'd go along with because it's in the foreword in your book.
Yes.
If that's the case, that it's kind of inevitable. You're suggesting that we will all inhabit Planet Social business. There are some businesses and some managers, some people that need to get their heads around the whole thing. I'm thinking just like starting with trust. What would you say, again, from your experience of doing work in this area, are some kind of small, significant, actionable things that people or businesses can do to begin to the preparation for being on Planet Social business?
I think just being more open. When you have a meeting, and as managers or whatever, share that with your employees. Let them know what you're doing. It's no secret. There's no reason why they shouldn't know, unless you're, trying to do them one over, obviously, then you don't want them to know, or that you want to fire some people or whatever. Other than that, why wouldn't they know? Why wouldn't they know where you are? I mean, sometimes I've had managers that were gone, and look, where have you been? And I'm not going to tell you. It's not your business. And like, yes, it is my business. Right? So just be a little bit more open, and especially when you're a leader, ask questions, ask for help, and get people involved in what it is that you're doing. Let them know that there's a business behind what you're doing. There's a whole company, right? We have business objectives, and don't go just like once a year where you have a presentation where some talking head goes like, and this and this and this and this and this is what we've done, and this and this and this and this and this and this is what we're gonna do. See you next year. Really? First of all, those presentations are usually as boring as watching grass grow, and nobody's going to retain anything from that, and no one is going to see how what it is that they're doing on a daily basis is going to affect that particular business goal. They don't know how that connects. Some do, but most don't, or maybe at that particular moment they see it, but as soon as they're back at their desk on Monday, they're not going to remember that business goal. And those business goals are important because everything you do on a daily basis should benefit that business goal. And if you don't know it, if nobody reminds you of it, how are you going to be as productive as you need to be? And managers can play a very important role in letting people know what it is that they're doing on a daily basis and how does it affect the company, how does it in fact affect the business goals, the bottom line. I think it's important to know. I would like to know, if I work for a company, what it is that I'm doing that has such an effect on whatever. I know if I work, I'm being sent. Okay, let's not go there.
Are there sort of case stories or stories of hope or something of people who have made the transition? And you talk about it being utopian, but there are people who you would say probably do inhabit Planet Social Business, that they have seen the benefits of doing all this. Are there some good stories that you know of that you've assisted people through, that you say, look, these are the benefits, these are the pitfalls that people encountered along the way, these are the challenges they face? Because you talk about things like, we need trust, we need openness. Yeah, that's true. And then I'm thinking of a couple of people in my time who I've met who I think, frankly, a couple of those folks need to go and get some decent therapy before they can be open as human beings. I'm not being
right. No, yeah, I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
I must honestly admit,
it's a big deal, really.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the opposite, and the negative effects that has on the way people work and the way people do business, basically.
Absolutely.
And the few cases where I've been lucky enough to witness the positiveness about it. One example was a fusion between two companies. Is it called a fusion? If one joins the other.
Oh, like you mean like a buyout?
A merger.
A merger? Yeah, all right.
Yes, between two companies where the sharing of information about everything that went on between the two companies was very important to let that know to everybody who was involved, which is every employee within the two companies. And that did have a positive effect. People did know what was going on, and we did get feedback from people that just, they weren't kept in the dark about what was going on. They knew there was a merger, but in some cases, people just don't share any information, and they just didn't know. And in this particular case, they did know. And we did get feedback from people that just were happy because, all the mystery that went out of it. And with the mystery gone, stress is gone. So by the time everything was settled and the dust cleared, people were, the transition was done. It's not like you have to do a merger and then you have to get people to actually get on board. They already knew.
There's loads of things that are fait accompli. That's right. Well, I mean, I think it's useful to have those sorts of stories, stories of hope, without sounding too hokey, really, because there will be people and businesses sitting going, we know there must be a better way of doing things, getting out of the industrial age way of working. We're not quite sure. And the other sounds scary or too utopian or too expensive.
Yeah, I might not use that word too much because it's what I mean. It sometimes sounds...
It may sound like it. That's what I mean. It may sound like it if you haven't yet gone to visit that place yet. And I think it might be a useful subject to revisit in a future podcast. And I think that, when we were talking about the problem solving sort of example for this one, it would be useful, I think, to come up with some more kind of concretes for people who are thinking, why would I want to invest my time and energy into becoming more of a social business? What's in it for me? What are some of the things that I need to learn if I'm a manager or a worker or whoever that I need to develop in myself? I mean, there is a thing that I see a lot, that the skills or capabilities that people need in the 21st century business and a social business are more akin to the sort of the areas around trust, good relationship building. It seems to me a given if you're going to be social, that you have to have good social skills, some relationship skills, some good people skills. So I would like to invite you to say more in a future podcast about some of this stuff, because I think people will be hungry for, so how do I go about this? If I haven't yet visited Planet Social Business, what are some things that I can do to familiarize myself a little bit more, so it doesn't feel so scary or be unachievable?
I absolutely understand what where you're getting at, because it can be scary, and dare I say it will be scary. But people have to be aware of the benefits, and that's something that I'd like to talk about more later on.
Yeah.
The potential benefits. And maybe we can get a guest or somebody who's been living through it. And, but yeah, I understand. I mean, obviously, this podcast we've talked about what it is, and it's still a little bit difficult sometimes. But I hope I conveyed that. But the process it's a long one.
It's a long one, and it's a huge area as well.
And that makes it less scary, because we do take the time. We start very small with a seedling, or the seed actually, and then we have that grow out, and then we move on, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's not that we're coming in and we're going to say, like, this is all the change that we're going to do, and everything has to happen within this amount of time. It's not a reorganization like you're ever experienced before.
Right.
And one of the most important things is that we get people on board and have them be comfortable with it. Because if they're not, people are going to push back, and it's not going to happen. And so as far as scary goes, it's something you try to avoid.
Well, we're not shy of having a go at difficult, large, scary subjects. I think that's kind of the point of doing this and exploring some of these areas of new ways of working together.
Yes.
Now, we need to wind up for this episode.
Yeah.
And we can go on, as you say, for quite a long time
talking
about this, which is why I signaled that we have more to. We've begun to scratch the surface. I think we have more to discuss, more kind of stories to tell around social business. And as I say, not shy of tackling large, challenging, complex subjects. Our next podcast is entitled Deeper Than Empathy.
Yes.
Which we'll try and do in around about half an hour or so. But for this podcast, I think we'll wind up. Yep.
Yes.
So from Roger and me, it's farewell until the next time. Thank you for listening.